this PowerPoint will cover how to write a short 10-minute play. The first step is to look for inspiration for your play. You might start with an idea or maybe a particular character to explore. Consider compelling situations that can be performed on stage. You should put these characters in a setting which allows for maximum character interaction. One of the biggest differences between a play and a film is the limited number of sets you will have. So go for one set and then decide how are these characters together and why are they together and why would they interact when they're in this space. Also make sure that your play is reasonable to be performed on stage. This is why it is suggested to limit to maybe one or two settings. That way there's not a whole lot of things that need to be moved around. Force the characters to interact with each other. Also, begin with minimal ideas. This is a concept that we cover a lot in this class, which is to keep things short and simple. So one conflict or one particular character who has a problem with another character will give us a very minimal picture. The second step is to start building your play. This is one of the most difficult parts because you really have to start adding a lot of those play elements. Establish the number of characters that you will have, their names and their personalities first. Again, keep it minimal. You want maybe two main characters, perhaps one secondary character, maybe a few extras. But for the most part, you want to keep it as simple as possible. Of course, give the character names, and if you need to, use a character questionnaire like you did for short stories in order to flesh out the character a little bit. Just like in a short story, you as the author need to know a lot more about the character than the audience ever will. Establish the setting. Again, keeping the set reasonable. A very common thing to do for modern plays is to keep the set very basic, where you might have a table and a chair on stage and that's it. So, don't have to worry about backdrops or anything like that. Just focus on what is essential for the play. Decide what the major conflict is going to be. This is one of the major parts of building your play, is to decide what's going to happen in these characters' lives. What will be the major issue that they tackle? Start as close to this conflict as possible. That way the story gets moving forward very quickly. The third step is to start drafting your play. Start out right away using the proper format. Start with character descriptions at the very top, and then a short description of the setting. These are very brief. Remember, you don't want to restrict them too much because somebody else will be performing. So if you want the character, for example, to be exactly 6'2", the director might not be able to find someone that tall. So you want to keep them as general as possible. For your first set of stage directions, when you first start the play out, it should start with stage directions. Decide who's on stage. So the lights come up, and what is on stage when the lights come up is your question. And that's where you should start. Sometimes there's a character on stage, sometimes a character comes in immediately after the lights come up. Get the conversation going right away. There's got to be a problem right there in the first scene. What is it? Something new happens in their life. So is it somebody comes to the door? Is it something happens to them? What has happened, or something just happened, and how are they dealing with it? And so your first scene will get the characters working through this problem, which will inevitably lead to that conflict. Add in minimal background information naturally. Just like in a short story, you don't want to give us an exposition dump at the beginning. We won't know anything about these characters when you start, but we should gradually start to understand how they know each other, if they know each other, are they related, what they're doing, why the conflict is there, and that sort of thing. As you reach the climax, you want to make sure, of course, you're doing that quickly. Add a little twist to it. This is the part of the play where you really want to start working on what is going to make this play different from other plays, what will shock the reader or intrigue the reader as you go through the play. And then providing a satisfying resolution to your play as well. A lot of students kind of drop off towards the end, but you definitely want to make sure that you have a satisfying conclusion. It doesn't have to be happy, but it does need to be satisfying. The fourth step is to start revising, and this would be where you start to go through line by line and eliminate anything that's redundant. One of the biggest mistakes that students make is not considering how well their characters know each other. If you have sisters, they're probably not going to refer to each other as sisters. This is often referred to as you know Bob dialogue, as in, as you know, Bob, this is the reason why we are stuck in this situation. So you try to avoid stuff like that. Definitely want to keep it natural between your characters. Read your lines out loud as well. You don't want to make things sound like people wouldn't actually say them. Remember, you will have actors who would be potentially performing this, so it doesn't need to be sound like something they would actually say. Don't use pretentious language unless you have a character who does that naturally. Add in those contractions, add in swear words if you need to. The chapter in your textbook has a lot of ideas as well. Revise for consistency. One of the things you might consider doing is reading all of the characters' lines together out loud so that you make sure he or she kind of speaks the same way each time. Add in some unusual character quirks. This might be something that they say. It might also be a mannerism that they have. Add in some dialogue tags. You want to make sure that there are some overall in the play, but you don't need one for every line, and this is important. You want to remove those dialogue tags where the line suggests how it should be read. That way you're not overburdening the actor or director with too many directions. The fifth step really is finishing your play. Check for the accuracy and consistency of your stage directions, again making sure that there are enough so that we know what's going on, but there aren't too many so that the director or the actors could not actually perform it. Short and lengthy lines, remember that unless you're actually putting a monologue in your play, most characters do not get very far in what they're saying before another character will interrupt them. So especially if you're doing some kind of conflict where it's a back and forth type of thing, the characters won't have very long lines before the next character will speak. Again, go for a natural feel to it, back and forth between the characters. If it helps, watch your favorite witty sitcom or something to help come up with some ideas. There are great examples of dialogue out there if you just Google on or go on YouTube. And just because you can see good characters interacting, and it's very interesting to follow them along. Add something unexpected to your play if you haven't done so already. That's the key part of doing any type of creative writing, is you don't want the reader or the audience to be able to predict what will happen. And finally, if you can, perform your play with friends. It's kind of fun to film it if you can. You can post it on YouTube if you want to. It's great to see what your play would look like. Now, one of the important things to remember about playwriting is that you as the playwright don't have much control over how it will end up looking on stage. You're just providing for the structure, which is why playwriting sometimes is even more difficult than short stories or poems, because you're missing an element, you're missing the performance element. So keep this in mind as you write your play. You don't want to limit what will happen too much, but you want to give enough structure so that it could be performed in the way that you are sort of envisioning. This has been how to write a play. Hopefully this video has helped you out a little bit.